Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Weekly Review. I'm your host, Paul Hazard, and joining me this morning is Christopher Bowles, Lucy Newberger, and Brent Poland. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
We've had snow this week, and we've had Storm Bert. Are you all safe from Storm Bert?
I mean, I don't know if it's going to hit in Portugal. I'm just looking out the window, and the weather finally appears to be turning here, but no storms on the horizon just yet.
Oh,
honestly, I've seen more wind from a hairdryer. Paul, obviously,
What's a hairdryer? What's a hairdryer?
Is that a dig, Brent?
No.
Yeah.
No, I would never.
Oh, dear. Yeah, and all this business of naming all these storms and all, I don't know. I'm not convinced of it. I'm more convinced of Hannah naming her glue sticks, but that's it. Anyway, on with the show as soon as I tell you who our sponsors are today. And they are John Catt, because this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools all around the world. Level up your professional development today by visiting johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. And if they know you listen to us and you put in JCTTR2425, they'll give you a whopping 20% off. We are also brought to you by Parentkind today as well. They're a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost attendance, improve behaviour, and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movements that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents. So, after this message, on to our first story. Now, disturbing story came out of the Education Support's annual Wellbeing survey, and the headline news is that teachers face an alarming rise in verbal and physical abuse from pupils. 82% of teachers report an increase in challenging behaviour from pupils that has negatively affected their mental health and well-being. And 70% say they face an increase in challenging interactions with parents. Now, the compilers of the Wellbeing Index are calling on the government to take action on staff retention, stress, burnout rates, and generally to do more to raise awareness of suicide risk and prevention. Brent, if I could come to you first, is there any support out there that teachers can turn to, or are we just thrown to the lions completely?
It depends. I think it depends. A lot depends on your experience level, your senior teachers, your head teachers. I think there's a bigger problem here with the connection, the correlation between those two statistics, and I think the social contract is weakening. I think the respect for schools is weakening, and I'm going to sound old-fashioned in this, but nobody takes responsibility any longer. I'm sick and tired of hearing it's not my fault. It's not my fault. There's no pride any longer. There's no shame any longer. There's no standards any longer. People just excuse. And I'm never accepting some excuses that you hear sometimes about poverty. I grew up in poverty. I have respect. I don't accept some of the excuse mongers who are basically enabling some children to run roughshod over human rights. We are secondary when it comes to it. Our rights are secondary. Our feelings, our thoughts are secondary. Teacher bashing has reached a new national game level where schools and teachers are being blamed for children. I shield children once or twice a week. I have very little input into their behavior. I am responding to their behaviors. And the problem is when you have some parent bullies who have been enabled by weak head teachers, weak trusts, who are more interested in the color of the school blazer and off-rolling children than actually dealing with the root causes of problems. Staff being expendable, blamed, not supported. And if you want I can only suggest to you the only organizations out there which are defending staff are the unions. And if you're not a member of a union, please join a union. And as a union representative, I can tell you that my workload has increased exponentially in the last 4 or 5 years. And the root cause is definitely these spurious, false, baseless complaints undermining staff. And it used to be that we were trusted, we were respected. Now it is we are guilty till proven innocent. The child's word is now accepted over the adult's word. And the behaviors that these children are exhibited can sometimes be excused by well-meaning psychologists who are not supporting us. They're telling us and guilting us and saying you should be doing this, and not understanding the real-time situation we're dealing with. And the real-time situation is we've got cuts of funding, record numbers of children. We are under stress. We're human beings, and should we make a mistake, we're out the door. Children get forgiven, we don't. And yes, we're professionals and we're adults. We've got to be the adult in the room, but there's only so much we can take. There's only so much we can take, and many of us have been broken. Broken because parents haven't supported the teachers. We are, I suppose, the expendable part of the equation. We're the ones that could be blamed. And this report's just it's not shocking. We've known it's coming for years, and it's going to be something the big Labour government's going to have to do, because this, for me, is the biggest problem with recruitment and retention.
Yeah. This is their 8th annual report, and each one has presented a declining picture, a very grave picture, actually. Christopher, if I could come to you, Brent mentioned the social contract there, which is kind of an agreement between families, schools, and so on, and very much about helping that kind of triumvirate, the pupil, the school, and the parent, to align around aspirations and so on. I think it's all very well and good when it works and so on. But look, it's falling apart, as Brent says. The reality is 84% of teachers saying there's an abuse, and that's directly correlated to poverty and so on. I know Brent answered that well, but what I want to ask you is this a kind of Sisyphean task? Is there no end? Do we constantly have to keep pushing the boulder up the hill only for it to roll down again?
Well, in a word, yes. I mean, the lack of SEND provision that has affected schools is quite troubling. So I think SEND needs a considerable overhaul. Have we allowed too many reasonable adjustments to be granted to borderline cases, so that the collective effect is that the educational experience for all has become unreasonably adjusted? Is this why local authorities are struggling to process backlogs of EHCP applications across the country? That's got to play a part in it, surely. If we're not meeting the needs of the children in the classroom, then that's possibly contributing to some of the problems we described. So I'd ask, could we rationalise SEND provision without jeopardising the performance and experiences of future cohorts? Because that is what schools are unofficially doing now, I suspect. Because when governments tell public servants that they need to do more with less, what this always means in practice is that those actually involved in delivering services have to establish their own system of priorities based on the needs of the people in front of them. So I've got nothing more to add, really. It's a big mess, and I honestly don't know how it gets appropriately fixed in this Parliament.
Yeah. Lucy, it's a big mess. Christopher tells us, I think he's right. Big mess with disturbingly high rates of stress and burnout. We've got 77% of teachers reporting mental health symptoms, insomnia, very high on the list. Irritability, I think many of us are familiar with that one. Difficulty concentrating, I think a lot of us are very familiar with that one as well. And then, some of the broader kind of, just general anxiety, stress, unease, burnout, and so on. In fact, and we mentioned psychologists and so on this morning once or twice, teachers score very low on a lot of those, those inventories for managing mental health and well-being. Lucy, this is an army dying on its feet. How long can the erosion of people, individuals, it's a person standing in that, how long can the erosion of individuals and what we do, how long can that go on?
It can't. We are in full-blown crisis, and we have been for really as long as I can remember at this point. I mean, certainly part of the reason I originally left the UK to work abroad was because I'd had enough. And you hear stories certainly out here of why teachers are leaving in their droves, why there is a brain drain. There is so much that is great about what we do. There is so much about this profession that I love and that I know we all love, but we need a new PR person, that is for sure. We need somebody, we need to be celebrating our own jobs. I know Brent talks about this a lot, where, we need to, as much as there is a lot to be sad about, we also need to be bigging ourselves up. We need to be trying to, shout from the rooftops that actually, we are doing what we can in phenomenally difficult circumstances and I hate to bring it up again, but in a post-COVID world where there is so much going on, so much to contain within a day, so much to deal with, but also, the kind of the multi-agency approach that kind of should be going on as well is not going on, because all these other agencies that support schools and support children, families, young people are absolutely at breaking point as well. So it's not just us who are suffering, it is the whole thing. And I honestly don't know where we start in fixing it, but we need to, it's now. Yeah. It has to be now.
Definitely. Yeah. JBL, regular listener, had a comment up there a moment ago. I think there it is again. Yeah, we would be far quicker, we should be far quicker to exclude from classrooms, but slower to exclude from schools. He grew up in dire poverty as well. We aren't respecting students or families by accepting unacceptable behavior. And I mean, to that, I might add Brent's point that just because you do have difficult situations and circumstances, you don't have to be rude or vulgar or angry or aggressive with teachers.
To be honest, Paul, some of the worst behaved children I've taught have come from professional households.
Well, we know that too. Yes, we do know that
they have been enabled, spoiled, and given carte blanche to undermine, bully, and to use their cultural capital to, I think, sometimes wield an inordinate amount of power over teachers and even bully head teachers. So some of the pattern I'm seeing now, it's not hardworking families. It's actually enabled, entitled, spoiled, rotten people who just want to do what they think is right for their child and be held to the consequences for everybody else. I think there's a selfishness that's prevailing now in society, that now we are holding the line. And because some of us have the courage to turn around and say no, the teachers that say no are the ones that get targeted for that abuse, because they have the courage to hold the line and they don't get supported. They don't. And there has been the problem that has driven people out of the teaching profession, because they've held the moral line and they've been thrown under the bus by people who frankly haven't got the moral courage to be in leadership. And I'm talking about weakness within the teaching profession. And people should stand up for their colleagues, stand up for what they think is right. And we're losing those people because they are being slowly chipped away. And it's death by 1,000 cuts for some people. It really is. And there is where it happens. We need to encourage and motivate each other and support each other, so when people are being come at with those type of parents, we stand together united. And that is what needs to happen as well. We need a champion for teachers. We need people to sing from exactly what Lucy said. And that means the media needs to get off our back. The government needs to get off our back and start supporting us, because they enable this teacher bashing by undermining us. So we need support from the very top, every level of top government, support management, leadership structure, because we are frankly, I feel like soldiers in the front line in the First World War, or lions being led by flippant donkeys to the slaughter. And that's what's been the situation for a very long time. Anyway, this has been a part of the broadcast. So behind the teacher party, please make the next selection.
It has a little bit, yes. But I take your point very much about courage and leadership. It's very, very vital quality. to have and to wear on your sleeve in front of staff. You know, you lead from the front and noblesse oblige, you know, very old-fashioned term now, and to have that courage when you do meet, you know, parents, inspectors, and so on. Yeah. And just in case teachers are concerned about going into a classroom tomorrow morning, and many of you will be, I did ask our panelists just if they had a nugget of wisdom that maybe they could share. I'm not sure everybody will have, because we did have one person on the team who slept in this morning, and I will allow listeners to work out who they think that is. But my nugget of wisdom is, I would just say to teachers, look, you are more than the job. By all means, prepare well. You will get blown off course, but use your preparation as a touchstone. Come back to it always. Have confidence in what you do, why you do it, and find some human satisfaction in something you do every day. Anybody else? Any nuggets of wisdom for our viewers and listeners?
I think you believe in what you are doing. You are a professional. You have trained incredibly hard. Even if you're at the beginning of your career, you know what you are doing. You understand what you are doing. You are in a position where you are the one that you are the go-to person. You are well researched. You understand this profession. You understand children. Don't let anyone undermine you. And it is so hard to do. It really, really is. But you have got to, you put yourself in this position. Therefore, you've got to act and at least, put forward what it is that you believe in. Brent, you're on mute.
Brent, you're...
Yeah, hold the line. Don't let your standards drop. Even if your standards are better than your senior management, they come up to you. You don't go down to them. Don't be dragged down. Hold the line. You're a teacher. You're a professional. You're an intelligent individual. You've earned the right to be a teacher, like many of us have. Don't let them get you down. Because you win in the end. They often say there's no Irish statement for that. It's not the people that can inflict the most damage that actually win in the end. It's the people that can endure the most. So sometimes we have to endure, but it is coming out the other side. Sometimes it's hard when you can't see light at the end of the tunnel. But if you keep at it, you're more likely to succeed. And that means sometimes holding that line. And that's difficult in the dark months like now, and sometimes can feel. But seek support, hold the line. And in the end, people, even kids and parents, they respect strength. They respect strength. And if you hold that line, then they will respect that a lot more. And that is a part of the problem I think education has lost, is that we're too afraid sometimes now, because we've been a bit neutered as a profession. We can't shout, we can't do this, we can't do this. We've almost had a lot of our tools taken from us, but we still have a lot that we have in our locker that we can use. And that means respect is earned. And sometimes that means you just got to hold the line, not give in. And that means sometimes holding the line against your own senior management. So be it.
Christopher, would you have any nuggets of advice for teachers tomorrow morning?
I'd say write down your 3 greatest worries. Talk to someone you trust about them, someone you really trust, whether they're inside your school or outside your school, and then find out if they really exist. And if you don't have a buddy, ask for one.
Good. That's all we have time for on that story today. Now, we must address emotional well-being at primary school. So says Olli-Pekka Heinonen. What a smashing name. You really have to have a special name, don't you, if you're going to make it? Like Brent, for example. You can't have a normal name. But anyway, we're all familiar with the pressure on children and young people nowadays. What they have to manage with on a day-to-day basis, what they will face in the future, much of which isn't even known yet. But Olli-Pekka Heinonen, who's the former Minister for Education in Finland, currently the General Director of the International Baccalaureate, he wonders, could it be that all these challenges might be interconnected symptoms of a shared root cause? Now, it's a good question. He goes on to say, because we then address each one of these things individually, we might be making the situation worse. He says the teachers in front of children who know them best should have the flexibility, the time, and the resources to tailor the curriculum to children's needs. Lucy, if I could come to you first, surely this is exactly what needs to happen to prepare children for their future.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this goes for any classroom, but particularly in primary school. If those children don't feel, I mean, it's about psychological safety. If they don't feel like they are in a safe space where at the very kind of basic level that they are happy in where they are, that their well-being is the focus of the day, then it's a non-starter for me. And I know that teachers who feel this way often get kind of put in a sort of, the hippy dippy box of kind of, it's sort of all about, their well-being. And yes, it is. It is. It starts at the beginning. It starts with, the sort of the talking at the start of the day. Very early on in school, it all gets pushed into kind of a sort of rubbish kind of half-hour PSHE lesson or bit of circle time, and I'm sick of it. I don't want to see that. I think we talked, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, about the curriculum being pushed too early on children who are too young, particularly in the UK. Children go to school aged 4, which I have feelings about as well. And yes, okay, there is a lot of play-based learning that goes on, but they're still being assessed, they're still being watched, they're still it's still not entirely about just introducing them to the world and introducing them to different things and sort of reading the room and kind of working out. And I think at primary, it should be at primary level, certainly in the lower years, and certainly at sort of EYFS level, it should be, and it should be more open. And then that transition into year 1 and beyond shouldn't just be, right, we go from having a sort of less structured time to a entirely structured time. I think that there, again, and this sort of feeds into the previous story when we talk about trust in the professions and trust, we do certainly in our PGCEs. And when we study, we look at child psychology, we look at child development, and then suddenly as if we never talked about it. It's as if we never looked at those stages of development that we've talked about before. It's as if we never had any kind of inkling or background in this. We know what the kind of right thing is and how this probably should work, but we are being squashed and told that, no, it has to be this way. They have to be learning this then. And it's nonsense.
It's actually very fascinating. He makes reference to some of the things that children should be, looking at. It's very fascinating. I used to ask younger children very often, what is a person? I mean, the answers you got were like, you and I have an interest in philosophy, Lucy, but you see, to ask a young child, what is a person? Oh my goodness, the answers you get are amazing. Absolutely. Anyway, Olli-Pekka Heinonen, I like that name, I'm going to say it at every opportunity now. He has a vision for education that's very much about a flexible framework for content and for teaching, with adaptable structures that support very much, what we're saying, the human dimension, the emotional intelligence. He wants to limit assessment and really concentrate on, the greater significance of preparing children to go out into a very complex world and to go out with, confidence, resilience, and so on. Now, I have to say, very much against the stream, against the that would have been a lot of the work that I would have tried to do. But Brent, I'm wondering, are there schools that have an approach like that today? Are they even able to do that, with the pressures and so on that are on them?
I think there are pockets of schools like that, but you have to pay a lot of money for them, unfortunately. I don't think your bog standard primary, secondary school in the system is allowed to do that. And I would remark that that's a 21st century model in a post-industrial world, but our schools are becoming more industrial revolution, Victorian even, draconian, rose, authoritarian, dictatorial, which is having, I think, a cognitive problem in our children. No wonder the behaviour is going the way it is. They're being suppressed. The subjects are being narrowed. They're told English maths, phonics, everything about learning now is process rather than fun. What the hell's the fun? And even now, you're right. We send children in this country to school at an early age. We know the reason for that. I know the reason for that is to get their parents back to work. Because that's really what we saw during COVID, where we're glorified babysitters being dictated to what we educate children, how we educate children. I'm a teacher. It's pedagogical. It's a 2,000-year-old profession that doesn't change in many ways. What it does is the fact that now it's industrialized and literally you've got pile as many kids into a classroom, give them less resources, and then dictate to them how they learn. Because one size fits all, it doesn't. One size never fitted all. And the Finnish model, every time we wheel it out, we just say, wow, how are they getting away with it in Finland? It's a European country. We're a European country. Finnish children and British children's brains, they're not radically different. They're not that different species. So how the hell can they do it? But yet we've got this lot over here who don't follow the evidence. We don't follow any pedagogical evidence because it's ideological policy driven by the needs of a government who sees the education system as something that they do to keep parents busy, to keep kids busy so parents can go off and do work. And I think they need the philosophy of what education is about, because our children's education should be tailored to meet their needs so we can develop their personality, their soft skills. We should be teaching them how to learn, not what to learn, but the process of learning itself needs to be integral. Emotional intelligence, communication skills. Automation is going to wipe out the next generation at a time when they haven't got the skills. What can the next generation offer when you've got automation plus artificial intelligence? We need to get our kids to be flexible, adapt, because the world is going to change. We're going back to industrial revolution when in fact society is moving that way and education is moving that way. Complete disconnect. So we need to
I'm very intrigued because obviously this curriculum and assessment review, which will come out next year, they've just finished gathering the evidence for. I'm very intrigued, and Hannah and I are actually going to discuss this on our show on Tuesday to see whether well, we kind of know what will come out of it, but to see whether it's acted upon or what kind of changes are made, because this current curriculum that we're still peddling, particularly at primary level, is just, we need to move on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No, that's exactly what I was going to ask, Lucy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's more curriculum to teach, more challenging behavior you must manage, and if you don't, it's your fault, but less time to do it all. So says Fig, the moving teacher, isn't it? Yeah. Whom we know very well on TTR. And JBL tells us we listen far too much to remote research and not to teachers. Absolutely right. And we are going to cover a story about that and the commission bodies and so on that are set up, and very few teachers on those bodies. We will look at that at a date in the future. Chris, if I could come to you then just for a final kind of section on this. Olli-Pekka Heinonen says, learning happens in the interaction between the learner and the world. When the world changes, as it is doing so now, the relationship between the learner and the world also needs to change. I love that. Absolutely love that. That's exactly what we're saying. But could I ask you then, why are governments, education authorities, decision makers, why are they really like dinosaur in decision making? They're slow, they're old fashioned. Brent described it all perfectly.
Well, in short, because they're too slow to see the asteroid approaching until its impact is inescapable, and too quick to leap on today's vision of what tomorrow looks like. I think we are exceptionally poor as a species at anticipating our future needs, and we'd like to think that a happy, fulfilling future looks a lot like our happy, fulfilling past. And you can see evidence of this throughout all government departments. I think flexibility rather than rigidity is definitely the way to go. I think we need to be reviewing our curriculum offer nationwide at least every decade. And specifically what primary education probably needs is a return to feelings of community and the primary teacher as the child's guiding star, the sun of their solar system, and unprecedented levels of SEND support, a curriculum that lets children develop and explore early knowledge, and an as yet undeveloped assessment system that registers what all of them can do, and a stronger voice, as we've already heard, for primary education in the curriculum reform debate, and a more meaningful inspection system that recognises what can be achieved in smaller primaries with fewer resources, then perhaps we might be better prepared for the next approaching asteroid.
Well, Christopher Mack gets my vote for Minister of Education of the world. And that's unfortunately all we have time for on that topic today. Now, in our final story today, a report by the Schools Association has examined the benefits and challenges of girls-only education. 67% of teachers say social media is the largest challenge girls-only schools face, and 58% of teachers saying mental health issues are their primary challenge. Now, Donna Stevens, who's the chief executive of the GSA, says, I think what they're really saying is that social media is most impactful for girls, full stop. Chris, would it be your experience that social media is most impactful for girls?
I've seen some evidence of that in my own experience in the classroom, and the GSA are always an important voice and always worth giving their thoughts some consideration. Social media certainly brings the malign influencer into the private space for all children, and it poses real threats to forming balanced perspectives for all children, but specifically in a range of areas for girls, I think. So influencers endorsing disordered eating, for instance, influencers criticizing other female role models or promoting consumer junk that no one ever actually needs are real serious threats, I think, to our young girls in schools. Add to that the in-crowds and out-crowds that we've always had in schools get translated into the World Wide Web. So social isolation can become a problem. However, schools now rely on the same social media channels to promote their offerings. Just ask yourself if there isn't a Twitter or Instagram post of a local celebrity opening the school Christmas fair, then has that fair really happened? How do we move forward? Well, I'd like to see the under 16 social media ban brought into law as quickly as possible. This will mean that schools will also have to think carefully about how they use these platforms themselves and the messages they put out on them. I'd like us to be empowering female teachers to be the role models our girls need, and the GSA do a really, really good job of that. And I'd like us to ensure that our PSHE programs are as focused on malign female influences as they have been on malign male influences in the recent past.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Interestingly, in that same survey, teachers said one of the reasons they enjoyed working in girls-only schools was the ability to have influence specifically on girls. There wasn't, the boys there. Lucy, 47% of these teachers surveyed said that there are fewer behavioural issues in all girls' schools. And Donna Stevens, again, the CEO, says maybe girls are slightly better behaved than boys. That's pretty contentious, controversial. So I'm going to come to the girl on the panel. Lucy, are girls better behaved than boys?
No, I don't think they are. I think with boys, it tends to be, and I am grossly stereotyping here, but boys, and I think I talked to you about this kind of before we came on air, with boys, generally it seems to be more sort of overt, like they'll thump each other, like it tends to be a bit more physical. You see it, there's the aggression, there might be the swearing, the what have you. Again, girls do it too, but seems to be less. With girls, it's more insidious. So while you might not be seeing them shouting, swearing, and carrying on in class necessarily, what's happening is the note passing. What's happening is the whispering. What's happening is the sending the messages, the comments on social media. So while that's not in school as such, it's filtering into school. It is, the Snapchat. It is the WhatsApp groups. So I don't think you can say they are better behaved. I think the issues differ, and it's perhaps harder to tackle in a way, because when two boys thump each other, you see it there, it's there in real time, you know, you deal with it. With girls, because it's always bubbling under, you know, and it's sort of happening, you know, it's not happening right in front of you. It's much harder to tackle.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think there's something to that, yes. And with boys, you know, if there is an issue, when it's dealt with by somebody, largely it tends to be over and done with, put away in the past, and they move on, yeah. There is a claim that girls might feel, for example, more empowered to put their hand up in a maths class when they haven't got boys in the room. And, you know, in a similar way, there's a claim that they're going to continue on doing sport for a lot longer, you know, when they haven't got boys, you know, watching PE classes or watching from the sideline or so on. Brent, I'm wondering then, does that make single-sex schools a good idea? Or would that be really to lose the myriad mutual benefits, you know, that co-education brings?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I think it depends on the child. For instance, I would say my oldest child would benefit from an all-girls school because she's a bit more sensitive, a bit more delicate, you know, and physically quite small. My second child probably would be better in a mixed education setting. And the facts do show that girls in an all-girls setting actually academically do better. Boys, when they're mixed with girls, actually boys come up and do slightly better, and there's no difference with girls. So girls mixing with boys actually doesn't improve their attainment, but actually all girls schools actually think it's about 15% better. So there is that aspect of girls having a little bit more security, freedom, in a sense. I suppose the classrooms are more measured, controlled, a lot more less aggressive. Boys can bring that aggression, that kind of that game, that sort of impulsivity and boisterousness, which can distract from the learning. However, society is mixed. When you go to a workplace, you know, girls go to a workplace, they've got to assert themselves, they've got to stand up for themselves. So there is that aspect of exposure theory of, well, you've learned to go to a secondary school mixed in with the boys, and you've learned to stand up for yourself. Whereas maybe going to an all-girls school would delay that and might give us a false sense of confidence. Then when you're chucked in with everybody else, you just haven't built up that resilience or that stoicism. So you might be delaying the inevitable and not learning those skills that sometimes you get with mixed ability. So you can be robbing Peter to pay Paul in that aspect. But I do think it's up to the individual child, and sometimes the parents know their child, and maybe an all-girls school might be good for some children at a certain stage of their life. So that's the other aspect. It might be an all-girls school with 11 to 16 and then mixed when they go to college. So I think you've just got to make the judgment call based on the personality, the abilities, and equally what you've got available in your area. You may not have an all-girls school in your area, because one of the things about the education system in England is it's an absolute mess. Grammar schools, some places no grammar schools, free schools, academies. You just take a postcode pot look to what you've got, and you've got to match, I suppose, to what your child, to what you've got in the local area, and try and see, can you make that fit? And I think that's something that needs to be looked at as well. Whereas, you know, Paul, in Northern Ireland, we have all girls grammars, all girls boys grammars, of which I've been both, not been with all girls. I went to mixed, then a grammar school, all boys, 17, 18 at A levels, and it suited me down to the ground because all I had to do then was not focus. Whereas a lot of my friends that went to college at 17, 18, let's be honest, they were distracted, shall we say, a lot more than I was. Whereas going to an all boys school, it was kind of like, well, better focus on our learning because there's nothing else to distract us here. So it does depend on the personality and what you want to get out of education and what your parents want you to be able to do as well.
I think you're right. I think there's something to that. I went to an all boys school. It's on the other side of the town you went to, Brent. And yes, girls would have been this mysterious kind of, you know, you were attracted to them, but my goodness, you were very scared and worried about them.
They're Irish girls as well. We probably should be scared and worried about them because, you know, they are fierce. I'm not stereotyping. I'm just saying, you know, rabbits in headlights. Let's be honest. I mean, our actual schools used to have the boys' schools and the girls' school used to do different lunches so that we wouldn't mix in town. I mean, we were kept apart, and even in mixed ability, funny enough, in mixed ability school, boys and girls PE. One of the things that I could never get my head around when I came to England was boys and girls PE is mixed. We never got that. Was a curtain come down. The girls behind some secret curtain, like, you know, in the Wizard of Oz, you know. The girls behind the curtain doing PE, and we boys were behind a different curtain doing PE, and we could hear the noise, and they could hear the noise from us. But, you know, never the twain would meet, you know. So you can't do that in mixed ability. You can't, exactly. Whereas when I do PE cover lessons, they're doing dancing, and the boys and the girls are in the same room. I'm thinking, well, this is a lot different than what I used to get, even in a mixed ability setting, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Lucy was looking very baffled there for a minute or two.
The virtues of a Catholic education, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm still haunted by girls' grammar because I'm from Kent originally, which is you know, many people will know still kind of is it's you know, you've got and I worked in Kent for a time as a teacher, and when you've got kind of parents asking you about the 11 plus when the child is 7, it's sort of
yeah. Anyway, 3 great stories for today, but that's all we have time for them. Now, our shows of the week, and I'll go first. I listened to The Power of Relationships and Values with Claire Cannon on Friday. It's a show that explores what happens when your values conflict with the school's values, something we've talked a lot about in today's show. Now, as well as the theme of the show being attractive, I really liked what the guest Sophie Williamson offers, which is a number of ways that you can deal with misaligned values. I'll not give away any spoilers because there are great nuggets of wisdom in there. It was a very informative show that all newly qualified teachers and experienced teachers would do well to listen to. Christopher, what about you? Anything caught your ear this week?
Yeah, well, I listened to Danny Wally's show on Classroom Crazes Part 2, in which she reappraises teaching styles and growth mindset in response to listener texts, and drawing on her own experiences as a teacher, leader of teaching and learning, and designer of professional development. And I was particularly interested in her section on whether we should be praising attainment or effort in the classroom. The show is an excellent listen and even invites listeners to engage in some educational futurology, as Danny invites suggestions as to which current in vogue practices will become tomorrow's crazes.
Great. Lucy, what about you?
So although it's kind of under the headline of Tom Rogers, he was joined by Catherine Clark, who I have to give high praise to because she was fantastic hosting this show with OCR Maths. And it was about accessibility in maths. And as someone who found maths very difficult in school and only really kind of got to grips with it later in life, it was very interesting to hear what OCR are putting in place to ensure that exams and their materials and maths in general is more accessible to everybody, and that it is about the maths rather than trying to decipher questions, trying to pick apart a difficult font. And I've never known a conversation about fonts be so in depth as well. Apparently Arial is the way forward, so those of you messing around with Comic Sans, still stop it. So that was with Caroline Hodgson and Neil Ogden from OCR Maths. Well worth a listen to.
Comic Sans, that's as bad as wearing trainers in the classroom, Lucy.
So hill I will die on.
Oh dear. Brent, anything caught your ear or your eye this week?
I'm a Times New Roman classical guy myself, personally.
Why am I not remotely surprised?
Absolutely, go classical. Absolutely. I was listening to the witty banter between the two, Ray and Leanne. They had the age-old dilemma of what to do with the schoolwork when it comes home, and the holiday dilemma, to work or to not work over the holiday. And just the anecdotes between the two of them of kind of the one that struck with me is taking the books for a trip, leaving them in the boot, and then not wanting to take them into the house, because that's like taking the children into the house, kind of like that's my safe space. I'm not taking the children's books in. That's like taking the children. I want them to stay out there rather than. So there was a lots of sort of anecdotes and witticisms about that age-old teacher dilemma of what do we do, when do we get our work done, how do we work, and how can we get around sometimes the fact that we don't want to drag our work home, but then when we do drag our work home, we have the guilt of not doing it. I mean, we've all done it, but it was just well done between the pair of them, because I had myself laughing along to it between the two of them, because they were just, as experienced teachers, sort of laying it out, like the pros and cons of doing your work at school versus taking the work home, taking it for a trip, then feeling guilty about not doing the work, and then saying next time I'll do it differently. And it was just a really good listen, because it was something we can all relate to and something we've all probably done, and probably never going to answer that question of what do we do? Do we do the work during the holidays and not? I think it's just an eternal teacher problem, that one. But worth a listen to. That was a Monday night show with Ray and Leanne.
Super. And that reminds me, Teacher Talk Radio very often is something of a counterbalance to the stresses you feel, with lots of humour, useful advice, and of course, great hosts. That's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much to our sponsors, John Cat Books and Parent Kind. Thank you to our panelists as well, Christopher, Brent and Lucy, and Leanne Lax, who looks after us all in the background. Now, you'll be getting a break from me next week when the wonderful Lucy steps into the hot seat. Don't forget to let us know what you think of the show in the comments. And remember, there are lots more shows on TTR, including 2 live shows today. James Redburn and Graham Stanley coming up at lunchtime. And 8 o'clock tonight, you have the wonderful Amanda Kinsley Smith. That's all from us for this week. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.